Hi, I'm Mark Davidson with Wine Australia, and we are doing 15 minutes on Cabernet Sauvignon. So, we're going to look today at the history of Cabernet Sauvignon in Australia, the regions where it grows and does really well, and then we're going to talk a bit about the art and science of blending. So, Cabernet Sauvignon. When people think Australia with red wines, they often think Shiraz, and rightly so. It's the benchmark variety in Australia, but don't forget about Cabernet Sauvignon. Long storied history in Australia, dating back to the mid 1800s. It took some time for Cabernet Sauvignon to find its footing. It didn't do quite as well in some of the warmer, drier regions. It needed to find these more maritime, sort of moderate climates. It's fantastic as a single varietal wine and forms the backbone of some of these classic blends. Classic, regionally distinct, and expressive wines can also be had from anywhere between $20 and $150. So you've got the full spectrum. And I would argue, and when we're done this presentation, you'll see that I reckon we've got one of the great value Cabernet Sauvignon countries on the planet. So major regions, we are going to cover just a few today, but we'll make a quick mention of some of the others. Yarra Valley, Coonawarra, Langhorne Creek, McLaren Vale, Barossa Valley, and Clare Valley all do fantastically well with Cabernet Sauvignon. And last but not least, Margaret River out on the far west coast. So the blending portion with Cabernet Sauvignon, there's many great wines, and our guest winemaker, Kate Goodman, who's going to be on shortly, she makes some pretty much straightforward Cabernet Sauvignons without any blending, but she also blends as well. And so there is a tradition of 100% Cabernets, but if you think globally and also in Australia, it's a wonderful blending partner. And we also have a very special, arguably uniquely Australian blend of Cabernet and Shiraz, our two benchmark varieties, as a blend together. There are people that would argue that that is one of the great expressions of dry Australian red wine. So Coonawarra, and we have a guest winemaker from Coonawarra, so I'm just going to touch on this lightly. Probably one of our most famous and historic regions for Cabernet Sauvignon, located on what's known as the Limestone Coast in the southern, so the very southern tip of South Australia. Maritime influence is a really important piece of the puzzle. When you're in Coonawarra, you seem like you're inland, but you do get a strong maritime influence. Very long, strong winemaking heritage. Cabernet Sauvignon, it's the king variety here. It is all about Cabernet Sauvignon and Coonawarra. Tradition of blending, sometimes with different parcels of Cabernet, but also with other varieties. The general characteristics, and we'll talk more about this later. Firmer tannins, bold, concentrated flavors of blackberry, mulberry, plum, and cherry. That's the kind of typical characteristics of Coonawarra. Margaret River, one of the other absolutely brilliant and famous regions for Cabernet Sauvignon, over on the far left coast, on the west coast, the southern tip, just at the confluence of the Indian Ocean and the Southern Ocean, is Margaret River. So Cabernet also, it's the region's hero variety. Lots of other things do extremely well in Margaret River, but when push comes to shove, Cabernet Sauvignon was what really established the region. Standout blends. It's not uncommon to find 100% Cabernet Sauvignon wines in Margaret River, but more common in Coonawarra to find that. In Margaret River, it's all about these standout blends. Very traditional sort of classic structures, but very innovative and experimental sort of outlook in the region. Medium to full body, there's a fine silky tannins in Margaret River, dark blueberry fruit, characteristics of bay leaf, and that sort of lovely herbal lift that I think great Cabernet always should have a little of. And Yarra Valley is kind of a sneaky one for most people. The typical modern narrative around Yarra Valley these days is about Chardonnay and Pinot and some other varieties, but there's a long tradition of Cabernet Sauvignon production in Yarra Valley. It was Victoria's first wine growing district, very cool climate style. Now, you can't grow Cabernet in every single pocket of the Yarra Valley. There are some sites that are just too cool, but in those lovely protected sites, it is a magic variety and has produced some very famous wines. Yarra Valley is also this beautiful mecca for food and wine. It's a wonderful spot because it's located very close to Melbourne, so it benefits from that. Styles range from medium to full-bodied with very silky tannins, aromatic, and there's always this lovely floral and herbal lift. And sometimes you're getting this sort of characteristic spice and vanilla along with these woody notes from the barrel aging. And there's Cabernet in a lot of regions in Australia, and there's some very good Cabernet. In fact, some of the oldest vines exist in Langhorne Creek and parts of Barossa. The three major ones that we looked at, they're the ones that really are the benchmark regions for Cabernet in Australia. But don't forget about Clare Valley, Eden Valley, and Barossa. McLaren Vale and Langhorne Creek, also some fantastic wines there. Okay, now we're going to bring on, we've got direct in from the Coonawarra itself. We've got Kate, who's still in the middle of vintage. It's got nice, long, brilliant vintage. Kate Goodman from Penley Estate. Nice to see you, Kate.
Nice to see you too, Mark.
Now, tell me, you've made Cabernet in many regions, but you primarily have focused on it, and it's a variety you obviously love, but you primarily focused on Yarra Valley, and I believe you've still got a little project up in the Yarra Valley, but your primary place of work right now is Coonawarra. Tell me a bit about Cabernet in general. What is it that has drawn you to loving to work with Cabernet?
So for me, there is a reason why Cabernet is referred to as the king of grape varieties. It is incredibly versatile. It is a variety that expresses its home so beautifully, more so than I think some other grape varieties. It doesn't hide the season that it's grown in. You can make a variety of styles with Cabernet, and it's a wine that you can actually make it. And by that I mean how you manage your Cabernet once it comes into the winery can really determine its endpoint. So as a winemaker, it's a great variety to be working with.
Cool. Do you find it difficult? People often talk, Pinot Noir is that difficult variety to play around with, difficult to grow, difficult to vinify. Is Cabernet difficult?
Is Cabernet difficult? Cabernet is more, I think you have more flexibility with Cabernet. It isn't as temperamental as Pinot Noir, having made loads of Pinot in the past, and I still make some. It is, there is a slightly broader band, but you can't hide seasons. So if you want to look at it that way, then those facets can be quite difficult. But otherwise, I don't believe it is difficult to work with once you get a feel for how to handle, or I don't like the word necessarily manipulate, but once you get a handle on what to actually do with it.
Great. Well, you clearly love it because that's your primary focus. So let's have a quick chat about Yarra Valley, where you're making it, and just a little bit of the lay of the land there. What makes it kind of the variety that works? I guess it is about the little pockets, though, for Cabernet in Yarra. You can't just grow it everywhere.
So I would say with the Yarra, it's very much the older, more parts of the valley, what's often referred to as the valley floor, where it's a lot warmer and on older sort of alluvial soils. It doesn't work up in the upper Yarra. It's just too cold. But Yarra Valley Cabernet for me has an incredible finesse and perfume and a suppleness. It's that we talk about the velvet glove. It has the suppleness, but it has the power. And I think some of the greatest wines that have ever come out of the Yarra and still coming out are the Cabernets, because they actually stand the test of time.
So true. When I take people down there, they're all excited, whether it be trade from various parts of the world, they're all excited about Pinot, and then they'll come away kind of shocked. It's like, wow, we didn't know this about it. So yeah, Yarra's it's a very special place for Cabernet, and a very storied place for Cabernet.
Totally.
But Coonawarra actually has probably in most people's minds, that's the history and reputation for Cabernet Sauvignon in Australia, even if that may not be 100% accurate because of Yarra's history. But tell us a bit about Coonawarra, because I think that's probably the one place in Australia where anyone you ask saying, what's a soil type in Australia that's connected to a particular variety and style? Everyone says Coonawarra. Wherever you go in the world, people know about the Coonawarra soil.
Sure. I guess it's an exceptionally unique soil profile, with Coonawarra being, built upon this limestone base that was once an ocean. And then with the very iron-rich Terra Rossa soil sitting on top of parts of the limestone, but that doesn't mean the entire district sort of has that singular profile. And the other very, very unique thing, which I think is incredibly valuable, are the cool ocean breezes that come up off the Antarctic seas and cool. We do get hot days during our ripening period, but these cool breezes sort of allow the Cabernet grapes when they're on the vine almost to, I think, exhale or just sort of rest a little.
Nice.
And for me, that is also just as important as the soil profiles.
Yeah, and I've not experienced it, but people talk about that because there's that weird sort of upwelling of a cold current that sits off the
That's
limestone
right.
coast. And people in the Coonawarra say during that latter part of the growing season, it's like, you can feel it. It's there. You can feel it in the air. And that's because when you're in Coonawarra, it doesn't seem like a maritime climate, but that's a very, very important piece of the puzzle.
And it really does get cold at night. We've
Awesome.
had 4 degrees Celsius this week at night.
That's
I know that's not cold, but it's cold.
That's cold enough. That's cold enough. Tell us about the style of Coonawarra, and to maybe even talk a little bit about sort of blends versus no blends, because you do a bit of both, correct? And at Penley.
So yeah, at Penley we do, about 98% of what we do is Cabernet Sauvignon, and we make single varietals, and we do some blending. And I guess if we think about Coonawarra, it is known for Cabernets that are incredibly age-worthy. But I think in more recent times there has been, I guess, people are embracing the fact that Cabernet can be more than one thing. Cabernet can be a more medium frame, juicy, ready for drinking in its youth, as well as styles that can, do 15, 20 years in bottle. So if I think about the Cabernets that I'm making, we do a 100% whole bunch Cabernet, which is released sort of in the year of making. Really juicy, fragrant, incredibly contemporary. We have, a couple of different varietal Cabernets at different price points. One of those we give quite extended skin contact, so it really changes the texture. And then, right up to these sort of icon wines, I'm also leaving Cabernet on skins for over 200 days without sulfur in concrete, just to sort of see what else we can do. It's an incredibly versatile grape variety.
And I think, listening to you talk, a little more versatile than people thought. And I feel like that. I think globally we've become a bit more accustomed to Cabernet is this big full-bodied expression, and I think the reality of Cabernet, it has a wider sort of gastronomic profile than that. I think that fragrant sort of lifted medium-bodied expression, I think people are sort of coming back to that. I'm seeing comments about that, and that's awesome. But you bring up a really cool point, which is about price. And I think if we look globally, and certainly not a criticism. I mean, all the more power to the regions getting really, really top money for Cabernet. I think it's wonderful. Let's look at Bordeaux, predominant Cabernet wines in Bordeaux, Napa Valley. But in Australia, a really expensive Cabernet would be what? What's your most expensive Cabernet?
Within our Penley range, our most expensive currently sits at 150 Australian dollars.
And the entry level affordable?
And the entry level would be our Phoenix Cabernet, which is $20.
And that's the beauty. You can find this in so many wineries across Coonawarra, Margaret River, maybe a little less so in Yarra. But the point is that from $20 all the way up to $150, you're finding regionally expressive. It's not just simple Cabernet. These wines speak, and the Penley Phoenix is a great example. Wynn's Black Label's another example. But the reality is you're tasting Coonawarra in the bottle, not just Cabernet. You're tasting Coonawarra in the bottle at $20, and you can work your way up the ladder as well. And I think that's a fantastic thing. So how many more days left in harvest for you?
We should be all picked by next week.
So that's
the
heading into May. That is,
yes,
that's
the winery is just
for you, right?
So it's just, it's a slow game at the end as we play Tetris and make room.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure. I'll let you get back to your ferments. It's morning there in Australia, and thank you so much for your time and the wonderful insights. And we look forward to seeing you next time I'm down in Australia when things ease up.
Absolute pleasure to talk Cabernet.
Thank you. Awesome information from Kate. Really appreciate that sort of insider knowledge. But to wrap it up here, when you think Cabernet in Australia, think about power, think about elegance, and think about age-worthiness. Also think these classic regions, Coonawarra, Margaret River, and Yarra Valley, the three icon sort of benchmark regions. Don't forget about McLaren Vale, Barossa, and Langhorne Creek, as there's some delicious Cabernets produced there. And the one thing you don't have to think about is your pocketbook, as beautifully articulated by Kate. You can drink fantastic regionally expressive Cabernet for $20, and you can work your way up all the price scales up to $150. And $150 in many countries for top Cabernet doesn't get you much. In Australia, it gets you the best.